Africa in recognition of her work in advocating for the enforcement of a national ban on importation, manufacture, and distribution of single-use plastics in Malawi. Welcome, Gloria. Please a round of applause. Next one, Scott Selwood from IRMA. So Scott leads IRMA's engagement and partnership with NGOs, trade unions, and mining-affected communities. He is an environmental lawyer and geographer with 15 years of experience partnering with civil society actors in Latin America, Asia Pacific, and Africa to advocate for structural reform of the mining sector. Welcome, Scott. Thanks for being here. We then have Wilfred Winnie, should I say, in the bureau from Global Rights Alert. So Winnie has 18 years of experience in natural resource governance. She was a former public pay coordinator for Uganda. She is also a member of the EITI MSG for Uganda. And now she's heading a social enterprise in clean energy. Thanks for making it clean. Our fourth panelist is Glenn Kupani from Industrial. Glenn, are you around? That's interesting. I think Glenn will join us later on, but Glenn has 30 years of experience in mining as well, and he is leading this global union of industrial. And the last panelist is Kateko Chauke, who is a human rights and solidarity activist. Welcome, Kateko. And she is the program director for Oxfam South Africa. So we have beautiful people here, as you see, and we're going to have a great discussion. So, how are we going to proceed? I will introduce the panelists that has been done right now, but we'll start with the first round of questions, and then a second round, and then we'll give you the floor, because that's the most interesting part, is interactive discussion on the stage. But let's start for now, let's keep the discussion. Gloria, I have the first question for you. You know that the rush for critical minerals is really leading to a wave of new tax incentives, special economic zones, and renegotiated fiscal regimes. From your perspective and from Tax Justice Network Africa perspective, how do these fiscal policies impact resource-rich African nations' ability to collect fair revenues from transition minerals? And then that's the next one.
I was trying to watch this, don't sound me. Because I lost my notebook earlier this morning, and I'm hoping that someone can find it, because I had very beautiful notes in there for this panel. So if you do, please bring it back. It says Kansas State University. And just a correction, I now work with Tax Justice Network Africa. So at this meeting, I have been branded as the new Mukuba, for those that know Mukuba. But I do have the privilege of sitting in her big shoes. And something that I'm very excited for, to be able to work with different people in this room to work on the issues that we're discussing on this very panel. Now, to go to your question regarding the impact of fiscal policy. We as TJNA, at the heart of what we do is look at fiscal policy, to look at tax. How do we make communities realize the benefits from that tax? How do we make tax work for people? Because that is the function of tax. The design of tax is not for a government, it's not for the people. It is actually designed for us, the people. So how do we design fiscal regimes that actually work for us, that work towards supporting people? And truly, as we talk about the transition, we have a whole new opportunity to think about what that would look like in this new world, where we are to some extent being left out of the conversation, because in the morning we discuss how when we talk about the transition, it doesn't really seem to come from us, it's coming from somewhere else. So how do we then structure our fiscal regimes around a context that is not directly related to what our interests are. So we're framing our discussion around what other people are aspiring to achieve. And if we look at the history of extractive, it's extractive. That is exactly how it is. So even the fiscal regimes are entirely extractive. They look at how they can benefit the people that are coming to collect these resources. And we have learned from that that there's different mechanisms, even within the fiscal regime, that actually serve that purpose. Now, when we look at the issue of revenue collection from transitional minerals, there are certain risks that still exist, including the fact that we have seen tax incentives that would be applied in different agreements that actually benefit the extractors more so than the government, the host government, and the host communities. And that's a risk that we have to think about, because when we look at generous tax incentives, what they do is they reduce the amount of revenue that we can realize from it. So as we talk about a transition, we have to be thinking about how we would remove these tendencies for our government to provide generous tax breaks, tax holidays, and just royalty rates that don't reflect what our needs are. We are coming from a side session right now where we're discussing the intersection between climate justice and extractives. And one of the things that we were looking at was just the gap in climate financing, the impacts of extractives and fossil on climate change, and how they're affecting us African countries the worst. And now there's a deficit in that. So when we talk about the transition, we need to be thinking about what those resources will do for us in terms of helping us address the new challenges that we're facing. Perhaps before we only think about how we could improve on infrastructure, on what we would do with the revenues in different contexts, but now we have to think about how these revenues will serve disaster risk management, how they will serve restructuring or rebuilding from disasters that are coming in because of the very same activities that we're conducting to realize these revenues. So those are things that we need to consider as we give incentives. It needs to be attached to the costs of what we are going to realize from the extractive activities themselves, even as we extract what we're calling transitional minerals, which to some extent may not necessarily also completely benefit us as host countries. And in terms of special economic zones, these have been touted to attract investment. But if we look back, if we really assess the benefits of that, I think we can raise a lot of questions in terms of how they would actually benefit host countries as we talk about transitional minerals. And it's crucial for us to assess whether these economic benefits that are being touted would really outweigh the revenue losses that we're experiencing. And these frameworks have been known to really just instigate illicit financial flows, to bring in losses of revenues through tax habits. And these are things that we are now saying, how do we consider readjusting the fiscal regimes to make sure that those losses are being cut out completely? And I'll be talking more about what we can do on this, and I'm sure these are things that we have really heard before, but I look forward to a discussion where we now say, how do we move forward from here? Learning from the experiences of the past, how can we restructure these fiscal regimes? How can we define what revenues in the era of a just transition will look like for our countries?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this first one, Gloria. It's really interesting, and in fact, taking to the scale, to the international scale, it's also the discussion, the justice of the free trade agreements. Who is taking profit on that business of critical minerals? These still questions that we dive into later on. But now let me turn to you, Scott. IRMA has been at the forefront of setting responsible mining standards. In the case of transition minerals, where the pressure to secure supply chain is immense, as we know, how can certification frameworks like the one that IRMA is setting up ensure that responsible sourcing doesn't take a backseat to geopolitical and market pressures? Sure.
Thank you so much. thank you so much for such an honor to be here with you all. Really grateful to the organizers for the flexibility.
Yes.
Wonderful, sorry. Just wanted to say, just start by saying a big thank you to the organizers for the invitation. It's a real honor and a privilege to be here with you all, and also the flexibility to allow me to step in with my colleague, Indaba, who's the regional lead for Africa with our organization, when she wasn't able to be here. So, sort of channeling a little bit of those energy and expertise and insights here. But honestly, I think to really answer your question in short, I think the way in which we keep the focus on responsible sourcing is actually each and every one of us in this room. We have that role to play. You know, I think it's really the demand that comes from civil society, from rights holders, from workers and unions, is really where we kind of keep this focus. Just before I guess it was late last year, I should say, I was in a round table in Washington, D.C., which is where I'm from. And this was a round table that was looking at US-China relations, right? So I think when you think about the geopolitical tensions, you think about these big players in the world today. And one of our colleagues from Peru actually really made the point that there in Peru, companies that were Chinese, companies that were American, companies that were from Australia, from Canada, were all having their projects stopped or delayed into the months. And so again, I think the point there being that all mining projects, no matter where they are in the world, if they cause harm to people, if they cause harm to the environments and to the ecosystems that people depend upon, we are going to see people have the power to stop, to delay, to stall projects. And so, I think that's a really important message again, because I think the takeaway for me was that it doesn't matter where the mine company comes from. It doesn't matter where their headquarters are. That there's this risk that when you don't respect the rights of humans, if you don't respect the environment, there's the real risk of project stoppages. Obviously, all of which delays has an impact on the supply. And so we know that the best way to fix these problems is through stronger laws. Stronger laws, more effective institutions, and I think that's that is the big goal, I suppose. And that's voluntary standard systems like OMA. We fit into that. We play a role, but we'll never replace the need for those stronger laws and effective institutions. But voluntary systems like ours really only as strong as the value that we bring for those who want to use our system. So that, to build trust with communities and workers, that means you have to share power. The bar must be set as high as possible. It must align with international human rights, environmental protection. We need to have a system that generates disclosures at the mine site level that communities can use to engage. And we really need to use those disclosures to push for change. And so I think we really need to, these are some of the value, and that's where we see the impact of the voluntary system. So in the current geopolitical context, right, where we see a rush, we see efforts to wind back, to weaken environmental and social safeguards. We see the targeting of human rights and environmental defenders. We see governments failing in their duties to respect the rights of peoples. And I think so in this context, how could you use a system like ours? Right, so we see ways in which there's a standard for responsible mining being used today in law reform and work at the national level to strengthen mining. Community groups, First Nations in Canada, for example, have picked up the OMA standard and have argued towards their government, towards the BC government. These are the changes, these are the reforms that we want. Communities can use the standard to access information about them. So if there's a mine in your backyard, in your neighborhood, and that you need to find information, you can use a system like ours. Ask that mine to be audited against a system like that. Ask them to be audited against the highest bar in the world today. That ultimately will be higher than many of the laws in that country. It can be used by mine workers, really, to organise, to demand better and fairer working conditions, fairer wages, to support collective bargaining, and you can really use the audit process to put your voices front and centre. So ultimately, again, as I said, I think how we keep pressure and we don't lose sight of the importance of the need for the recruitment market, each and every one of us.
Great, fantastic. Thank you for sharing those points. Really, really useful, especially in the work standards and ESG and everything is backsliding. That's feeling that more and more reluctant to apply. So thanks for your work. Let's turn to communities finance, self-determination work. But many critical mineral projects are located in regions, sensitive regions, I would say, where land rights and big priority for consent of communities are contentious issues. And I think that many of us in the room can relate to this depiction of the situation. What are the biggest gaps that you have seen in community consultation and self-determination that you have observed in Uganda?
Thank you very much. I think most of you would agree that if you went to your government officers, Department of Geology, and asked for the mineral currency reports, they have them, and they have had them for the last 5 years or so. So they know where the next mining projects are going to take place. It takes over a year or so for governments and companies to negotiate a project. So they go through, they have the reports, they go through the negotiation without considering the communities where these investments are going to take place. The only time governments and companies go to communities is when a government officer is introducing a company to the community. They've already decided, they know the population, they know the square miles of land that will be taken. And so they are saying here is the investor, they're going to take your land, they will give you jobs. Why does it take so long to engage the communities that you know definitely is going to be impacted on by the coming investment projects? So I think there's a gap there. I think we could be having studies and asking ourselves, if our country is this rich, what are people's aspirations? What are their hopes for any community? What are their fears for any investment? And how do they benefit from the investment that is coming up? Because once we go at the last hour, with deadlines, companies have already invested, we have deadlines, communities don't have a gap to negotiate. They are already receiving what has been paid for them, they are already responding to the questions that have been framed already, they are only ticking the boxes because that is what investment is requiring at that point. So I think that the preparation and seeing communities not as victims, but as a resource, as people that could benefit from the investment is what is missing. Usually, we find that businesses in the cities are forming mergers because they know that there's a project is coming. So, flight company, clearing company, food, communication, they are formed mergers so that they can meet the local content requirements for them to supply goods and services to miners and mining companies. But the women that have been around the mines, for example, if it's ASM area, the women that have been in the mines, that have been planning, that have been cooking food, that have been selling juice, that have been giving education, they are not part of the business community that is considered. So when investments come, they are edging them out because they cannot meet the local content requirements, they do not have tax identification numbers, they don't know how they pay taxes, their names are not reserved in the business registry, and they are kicked out. And yet this could have happened way before, so that they are part and parcel of that government processes. That's one of the major issues that I think we look at. The other one is assumption that communities are the same. And I know in our reports we have segregated data, we have men and women, those who identify as who, those how they are, we have that information. But when it comes to important resources, land, for example, how a community X controls, uses land is different from how a community Y does. But we still come with FP, those FP forms that for you to qualify and FP standards and want to apply them across the sector. We have families that are polygamous, have children and sons that have different fathers and husbands, are within different community backgrounds, and how the cultural system, how the social practices allow access, control, and use of land differs from land to land, most of the African context, from tribe to tribe, from country to country. But we don't want to invest time to understand how that then affects investments or how investment affects that kind of diversity. We want to assume land is owned this way largely, and so that is how communities are looked at. The other one, again, is to assume that that communities are big. And this is not just for companies, but for government and civil society. So when we are going to ask communities to have community agreements with companies, we are still looking at them as victims. We are not seeing them as people that have the power to influence and set very strong conditions for investors. So the narrative that where investments are taking place, there is already a victim group should change from the way we design our programs as government, from the way we design our programs as companies, from the way we design our programs as civil society. We cannot be looking at communities as victims all the time. We must look at them as people that can influence, that must benefit, that have hopes, that have aspirations, that can transform the way mining is done. Whether it's for traditional minerals, whether it's for development minerals, whether it's for oil and gas, whatever it is, you cannot keep looking and calling people victims because they are actually not. But when you have this narrative, it sends a signal that we all then want to live and abide.
That's a powerful statement. Because the communities are the ones who own the resources, and they are the ones who have benefit from it firsthand. So they have the power to really change and improve that narrative. Thanks for that. Kateko, there is a growing concern that the global demand for critical or transition minerals is repeating the same patterns of resource extraction driven inequality seen with fossil fuels. There is this what we call resource curse, which is affecting many countries in our continent as well. How do you see this dynamic playing out in Southern Africa and what to do here?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this very insightful discussion. I'm equally humbled to be here with colleagues who have been contributing long and hard to the kind of developments that we see within the space up until now. But we also need to recognize that we are in today's time confronting a more difficult monster. We know that our economies were built on the backbone of our fathers, our mothers, and so mining has played a critical role in development as we come to understand it today. However, the discourse around the just energy transition, the whole issue around addressing the climate change crisis has also presented a second minerals resource. Now, those of you who follow Oxfam's work, you will know that year on year we tell a story about inequality. and we do so loudly. We launched our impromptu Davos this year, but it's really to highlight the extent to which wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, to be exact, 1%. And so really understanding and taking note of just what that means helps us, one, locate ourselves within, the role that mind has contributed to, and also understanding the fact that it was once a highly contributor to GDP in Southern Africa and is no longer. But what this new mineral resource boom brings is a different set of problems itself. This is because we have critical minerals such as copper, lithium, and those critical minerals are actually sitting in countries where they are caught in perpetual cycles of conflict. And so you have to draw a linear connection between climate, conflict, and what we now have come to understand as the hunger, basically. And we also have to have these kinds of conversations in a way that leads to what people feel in their experience. I mean, the fact that our nations are going is just to show that the time that we find ourselves in is one. So, what are we seeing in terms of extraction and inequality is essentially how the demand for us to transition from fossil fuels into cleaner sources of energy says to the people with big money that, hey, we need to revisit that again. And this time, we're going to do it differently, with new kinds of technology, and essentially dropping them behind once again. So this means that we're gonna again take the land because that land actually has the critical minerals that they need to further advance their economies. Now, if we're not looking at key questions of value addition, then we are going to run into the risk of being deep before again, or enabling what happened to us to happen here. Because if the minerals leave our hands, which now is currently happening, we have our nations signing off 10 to 20% of their land mass to private sector to actually extract these critical minerals. Again, you see the generational aspects, you see the rights of indigenous communities being undermined. And so what have we been doing all this time, A critical question for this year's campaign is critical minerals for what? And so looking at these issues, and I come back to that issue as well, because I've just explained that the land goes, right? So that's like literally handing over our sovereignty. And then the extraction comes in, which essentially takes our high quality minerals, doesn't give us any technology or capacity to process in any format, takes it out, takes it off to the global north, repackages it, it comes back in an iPhone that is sold to us at twice the rate, if not 3 times. Let alone the kinds of issues that are presented by the deals that we have to the new green deal, for example, which also in and of itself has implications for our economies. Now, there is a good thing about us as Africans and our institutions is we put together policies, instruments that help us figure things out. The African mining experience. Did we domesticate it? I don't think we have succeeded. And now we have the NDC helping us figure out critical minerals. And so the green mineral strategy results, it actually tells us, okay, where are the big pockets or the big wallets of our critical resources, okay? But it also gives us a frame of, say, how do we start to protect ourselves in how how do we start to protect ourselves in terms of putting in place the necessary regulatory frameworks? And how do we protect ourselves by building social accountability mechanisms, etc.? I mean, I would go. But what we are not good at doing is translating that technical actions at the country level. And so I worry when countries get into processes where they start developing national policy from a top-down approach without actually understanding what that means for the local context. We've seen progress being made by some of our countries, Zambia being one of them, in terms of really developing or putting in place a plan that speaks to how they are going to approach its program. So that is commendable. I must say, countries should be saying about that. But we're also looking at issues around the impacts of the climate crisis, what this means for displacement, what this means for economic migration, particularly as mining grows and the demand for critical minerals grows. And so as civil society, we have to be locating ourselves and organizing ourselves in a way that really tries to put a consolidated offense, if I must say, in terms of really combating private interests in repeating the mineral resource curse. I would want to get into solutions later, right, after the next question, but there are some serious considerations and introspection that we as civil society have to make. I mean, when we come to platforms such as this one as well, we need to be clear about what our agenda is. Like this year, what are we putting forward to be investing in Africa and the pace at which conversations and developments and decisions happen on the other side of the road is far greater and quicker than we are catching on. So when we talk about what can we do, I think I'll contribute a little bit more in terms of that, but it's always great to paint the picture of what we are facing. And, if we let it go, we talk about decoloniality, we talk about entrenching from these principles, but I'm afraid that we're also losing sight of what we should be safeguarding, particularly without reintroducing colonization in the format. So I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. But I'd like to speak with you because for the sake of time, I'd like us to get into the second part of questions very quickly. So I'll give you 2 minutes to speak about solutions. You have already highlighted some of them, but if you could summarize what do we have to do right now? How can civil society and grassroots movements really hold governments and other stakeholders, including multinationals, accountable for ensuring that this energy transition is really just because we replicate the mistakes from the past?
I'd like to start with what Colin Scott was inputting, and I got really excited when he spoke about mindset. Okay, ICM and again put together now the new consolidated mindset proposal. This conversation is currently ongoing. Yeah. So looking at that is really understanding that this has a role to the game that we have longed for as a society. I mean, this mining standard essentially has impacts on transparency, accountability, it's lacking critical elements on clear commitments for ethnic from consent, for example, particularly for indigenous communities. We know the work that we've been doing to advance and active solidarity with the community in Kologeni, which is running the risk now in terms of that. It has no iterations or limited iterations on meaningful stakeholder engagement, amongst others, and its governance is essentially highly industry driven. So that has a serious effect on community participation, inclusive community participation. And that's the kind of conversation we need to be talking about there. How are human rights defenders impacted by this? What advocacy and solidarity agenda are we driving to really push back on what the ICM and the ICM are actually trying to push for now? So when we talk about solidarity and when we talk about what do we do as a society, is one, investing on the kind of initiatives that seek to strengthen communities' knowledge. Strengthen community knowledge beyond local governance frameworks or regulation frameworks, but also to draw the connections to include international developments, because ultimately where decision makers sit is where they set the pace for how implementation goes on. So I commend the work that has been done to focus on communities strengthen their capacity and knowledge. I really do. And I think we also have to bridge that gap with international developments so that we know what the rules of engagement are and we can equally push back on those things that take away from our gains. And lastly, and I don't really want to be we also see the agenda of the Trump administration. And so that means all hands on deck, stocks up, because the fight continues. So again, as also we act in solidarity with communities, we do want to drive an agenda that bridges the gap between the local and the global. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, really important points. Knowledge is power, you know. So yeah, I totally agree. Knowledge reaching for communities, we need them to intentional trends. And yeah, that's very true, unfortunately, that the Trump agenda is affecting all of us, but we have to fight back. That's just the way it is. Scott, can I ask you what kind of incentives exist for companies out there who want to comply with robust environmental, social, and governance standards? What will incentivize them to begin? So instead of really, for weak, fast-tracking investment and environmental things.
Thanks, Steve. So I think within the system, so we are equally governed, that's the beginning. And so we have mining companies, but we also have the companies that buy mining materials. And so we have the consumer electronics companies, we have the automakers, we have the jewelers who are sitting there, and they're in the jurisdictions where they're coming from, and thanks to significant pressure from NGOs and civil society groups and others putting pressure on them, there is more legal expectation on them to know what's going on in their supply chains. That those where they're sourcing materials from and not places where human rights violations are occurring. So I think in some ways there is an incentive there that they're creating financial value by participating in IRMA and by asking their suppliers, this is what we expect from you, take action, disclose, and then let us use this to help you, where you're this, how can we use our leverage to respond to it. That's just one place. So I was also thinking in terms of other ways in which we think about business case as opposed to high bar standards. It's really addressing risk, while promoting operational excellence. It's around improved practices. So within these kinds of assurance processes, it's really about identifying what is not working, where is harm happening, and what concrete steps can you take today and over the next 12 or the cycle of order to fix that. Okay? So it's continuous improvement. And I think that creates value. Enhanced compliance, improve community relationships, improve relationships with rights holders, and stronger and safer workplaces. Again, it's very, very fundamentally important. I think there's incentives around access to new capital, new sources of finance. Again, really trying to direct finance to go to the places where the mines are doing the right thing, or at least are committed to making change, correcting or broadly de-risking them. So those are just some of the, I think, the incentives behind that.
Okay, thank you. I think these are good points. Of course, companies should follow the money, but let's hope that in the future they also invest on the human. Really, with genuine and system way and the same. Gloria, what kind of transparency measures should governments and companies put in place? That's also another question. Companies may follow rules, but governments are the first one who has the responsibility to make those rules, enforced. So what kind of measures should they put in place to ensure that the revenues from these minerals fully benefit the citizens rather than enabling them to say illicit financial?
I really struggled with this question and I think about it. We've spent the last few days discussing about all these technical things that are in place or that need to be in place. How many of us know about beneficial ownership disclosure? With a show of hands in this room. How many of us know about contracts, access, transparency in this room? Not a lot. That's surprising. I was expecting more because I don't want to waste time speaking to the converted because we've been talking about these things all these days. But my concern is that when we leave here, this is all we take with us, right? And so we'll go back to the and say, oh yeah, we need contract transparency, we need beneficial ownership disclosure. My question is that if we get the contracts, do we know what to do with them? If you give a committee member a contract, and then what? What happens? Are they going to be able to translate that to say this is what this means for our community? Or that's it, or just we will give them the contract and that's it. So my concern is that this thing is happening. Whether we're prepared or not, it's going to happen. They are going to come. And I think we need to change our strategy in what we're asking for and in the way that we're asking for it. First of all, we have leverage now. We have so much leverage. Once again, they want something that we have, not for our benefit, but for their own benefit. And you know what's going to happen? We're going to lose all these minerals. And when we need all these technologies, we have to buy it back from them with the small money that they're giving us for getting our raw materials. So we need to start rethinking what we want to do, how we want to sit at this table, and what we want to say at this table. First of all, I think that we really need to build our own capacity in terms of understanding what they're discussing. If some of us stepped into the rooms that they're in just across town here, we wouldn't even be able to understand what they're saying. And we come back and then say, well, we want to be part of the conversations. We need to start preparing our communities and ourselves on how to be part of this conversation. And a lot of it means that we need to start participating more actively in these conversations that are happening with governments and start aggressively pushing to sit on those tables and say we want to know what's happening. We want to be taught before we proceed. We want to understand it. Before you just come and say we're consulting, we're telling you what's happening. Well, before we agree to it, we need to understand it. And then we agree for a piece of understanding. Otherwise, we're going to still get the short end of the stick. We're going to talk about beneficial ownership disclosure. We're going to have books, we're going to have libraries, we're going to have websites that have got so much information, but we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to use it. So I really, for me, I would want to see more of our work centering around really building that capacity for us to understand how we can use that information, how we can start applying it into negotiations. People that we're sending out there, the government officials, some of them don't even understand what they're doing that. They will go there and they'll give them the contracts and they don't even know. Maybe they don't even want to show us the contracts because even they don't know what the contracts mean. And they're afraid that the ignorance will show. So if we start building that capacity, we need to start investing in the youth, in women, in these communities to understand the technical aspects of this. And it starts from, I honestly was just so humbled in the morning when Honorable Kanisile said, how do you define a just transition in your language? I don't know. If I go to my community right now, I don't know how to define it to them. I don't know how to explain it to them. And yet I'm coming here and saying that I expect them to make a contribution to these decisions. around the just transition. We need to think about that. And so I think that's a good starting point for us to think about how we can translate all these things, all these tools that we have to help us negotiate better. Right now, there's a discussion around growth. Trump has come with his own agendas, and we need to start thinking, where are we on this? How are we going to sit at this table and use this, what we have now, to create better deals, to have better agreements? There's discussions around a global tax treaty. How do we leverage what we have? Because ultimately, we could be the losers, or we could actually be by leveraging all these resources that we have. So while they're saying drill, baby, drill, and here we're saying no, we must stop producing oil. They came here and they took all of our oil and gas. And then they say we don't need it, keep it. You're going to suffer the resource scarce, you're going to suffer stranded assets. We don't care. We've got our own. And now they're saying they should drill. So we start thinking about the future of that and how we can be more empowered to make meaningful contributions to the discussion around what benefit sharing could look like as we negotiate these contracts. As we say, we're coming back and we say we want to continue to extract in a just transition. How do we benefit these technologies? What do those contracts look like? How do we remediate the cost of extraction back to these communities in a way that is not restricted to the old language that we have been using all along? So I'm not going to speak.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's already something meaningful. Whether we like it or not, but we have to have a strategy. And now is the moment than ever, I think. And that's the positive side of Trump's craziness, if I may say. Like, really, it forces us to rethink the whole system and very quickly, because we need to adjust and we need once again to fight back. So now is the time. Let's finish our discussion on a positive note. I'd love to learn from you, to hear from you. What are the strategies from the communities which worked so far in really pushing back and trying to end those extractivism, I would say, or exploitative manners or mining deals, and really demand fair decision-making process. What works? What should we do more?
I think that I've seen work in Uganda is really acknowledging that community has agency. You cannot take that away from them. This community has existed. It has been confronted with hunger before, famine and disease, and they have managed to go through that in their own way. So when extractive companies come, it's nothing, it's a foreign thing, but they have dealt with other foreign things. So let's not create new communities. Let's agree that there are systems that can work and build on those systems, whether it's group handling mechanism, whether it's land acquisition, whether it's transparency and accountability. There are systems that have existed and can only be improved with times, with technology, with more access to information and connected offices that still work. One of the models that we use is a computer-based model. Because when civil society was raising human rights issues, connected to data, issues reports, companies blackmailed us, governments blackmailed us. And then we turned to the communities. So they are the ones that collect the data, they are the ones that know who has going to be compensated, they are the ones that know which well has been spoiled, they are the ones that go to government officers and tell them to come and fix a problem. That way, governments know that what the communities are saying is authentic. It's not foreign agenda, like they say. But also communities feel that if they can solve one problem, they can solve the next and the next. And they have pushed back. That creates space for more people to speak out, because it is a community. It is them, it's their son, it's their daughter, it's their mother, it's everyone in the community that's affected. It's a very good model to use to push back on community and companies and to hold governments to account. The other thing, of course, is that beyond, we all know that extractive work is very risky. So having security mechanisms in place, again, not very highly militarized, yeah, but in a way that, if a son of a chief spoke out, that communities will protect them. If another person spoke out, the communities will protect them. That gives them the confidence to approach and address any issue as they come. Will there be other threats? Of course, there will be other threats. But that's where you expand us for. Where you analyze how can government agencies help, how can human rights defenders help, but really putting communities, their needs at the front and the way they do things. One of the groups that we work with, a group of women who used to do this trade around the mines. And then there was a time when there was a conflict in the mines, ASMs, and they were evicted because they needed to give away land to a major company. So these women said, you know what, we want to be investors. We know where the gold is. We want to be investors in the gold business, but we don't know how. So they already knew what they wanted to do. The only thing that we did was, connect them to revenue authority, connect them to licensing agencies, connect them to Bank of Uganda so they can understand the gold trade, the licensing process, and how to pay taxes and be in the business. But also to ask government, what kind of support are you giving us as investors? You cannot get a tax holiday, perhaps. I wouldn't qualify for that. But what kind of support are you giving us? And they also started giving the government information about companies, what they were doing wrong. So they would go to government and say, this is how I can help you as a government. How are we going to help you? So there was a negotiation and a win-win situation. Government has good information, they are supporting a group of women to do business, to be investors, but they're also enabling decision making, self-determination, and all these other rights that we talk about. So once you go for a win-win situation, once you ask your government, how can I help you as a geological surveyor? Once you ask the minister, how can I help you as a person who owns land that has minerals? It becomes easy for government to trust you. It becomes easy for you to get support from government, and it becomes easy for you to push back on that place. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, to end up this session, is first of all, and the rules. Let's not ask questions to our panelists because they have spoke too much and in their positive way. I mean, gave us inspiration. But we would like to hear from you as well. You have 4 minutes and 20 seconds left. So I'll give 1 minute for each and every group, just to say reactions, no questions. First lady here, second lady there, gentleman there, and Mr. there. So go ahead. The lady out here was before you.
Thank you so much. I think from Zoria and Kateko, what you made me realize is how the lack of decolonization has got multi-sectional effects on Africans. Because what you spoke about, how long you define these things around you, said to me, we have over 2,000 registered ones. So if we had to really localize and be practical, that's a lot of work of the next 8 years. Then my recommendation is, and I sound like an empty team because I say this in all the meetings, what's stopping civil society in Africa for fighting for the adoption of Swahili as an added language in all our countries? Imagine in 12 years, because it takes 12 years to open my school, we shall have produced the first breed of Africans who don't need interpretation. And because they will be speaking it, even us who are not in school, we shall be picking up the Lingua Franca of it. Because Swahili Tanzania has done us a favor, it's conceptual, it's scientific, we shall define these things. So for me, my takeaway again is, can we be like Western people? They can have a 100-year plan of evil. Can we have a 12-year plan of goodness? Can we make Swahili a language in every African country? If we say in the next years, every grade 1 will do Swahili next to Zulu or any other language. That's my submission.
Thank you so much for that powerful submission.
Okay, thank you to all our presenters. I want to compliment Gloria for mentioning about takes. The state is the takes what is given to the multinational companies by the government. My election is I've seen and I've discovered that these tax incentives or tax holidays, they are not profitable to our economies at all. I don't know how we are going to, because Gloria also mentioned that she's also struggling to see how she can give us a solution to this problem, because it's a real problem. If a multinational company to do the extraction and even they are not paying tax, and really the tax burden is being given to the general citizens if they are continuing to suffer, but they have the resources. So I'm really deeply concerned as you are with this issue of tax incentives and tax holidays. Our government should be here with us, because the burden is on the poor, the general citizen. So to put it to finality, I think on my suggestion, I think the tax holidays and the tax incentives are not profitable. They should be stopped.
Thank you. I totally agree. Governments are the first one to be held accountable for that. Gentlemen, 30 seconds.
Thanks, seconds. Kanyesi Dr. I'm from Bulawayo. Just to comment on what you was saying, this is important because our major policy stakeholder here is the artisanal miners. They are the only legit people that are our stakeholders. Otherwise, the private sector, the corporate, they are there with the government. So now, in terms of addressing the inequalities in this whole thing, I remember in Zim, few months back, there was a serious wave of carbon credits. How people sell carbon credit, even today, no one has told us how to sell them. The people they told us, hey, you need to have an area. What I have a very big, huge in my village. How do I sell it? No one can tell me. Because if we could have that mechanism, how to sell or how to deal with those carbon credit stuff, that's where we can get money and then we invest in these our artisanal miners. Because either we like it or not, the just transition is going to happen next week. Very soon you see the policy wait there. So and then now, for example, in Zimbabwe, the next big thing is lithium. And I'm informed that no one can sell lithium to anyone now except to the government. And assuming that we formalize the artisanal sector, you're not going to sell the one packet of lithium to government. It's going to be a big corporation. So we need to find a way on how we can open market so that even if I've got 1 kilogram of lithium, it's not able to sell it and then we build it from there. Otherwise, the private sector, the government will be getting all the money that we are getting here. Thanks.
Thank you. Also, and the last one, the gentleman on the back with the phone up there. I'm sorry for the others, we are running out of time already.
Thank you all it's like I think you said I think we can start from why, because right now we are saying in one nation that the ones where we want to go and go now. So is to make sure that the task is in motion. I think in a way, like Comrade Chalala said in the morning, I think we should do like those non-meeting of water media. We should tax more than anything else, so that we can get money to sustain those artisanal miners. And secondly, we have the resources. Why don't we have something like Dubai in Africa, whereby we say we have got our own means. We regulate the prices rather than somebody coming from England, somebody coming from America, regulating the prices for us. I think that's a plan. Thank you.
Thank you. So, colleagues, the time is over. I'm really sorry. I think those suggestions were really something meaningful, not only from the panelists who gave what they had, it was really powerful ideas, and I will really, the common ground is knowledge bridging. I would say Would it be on standards, on taxation, rights for communities, everything? We have the impact to our people and help them understand what is at stake, minimum wage, away from big companies in really that's the way we're reforming. And all of you gave also interesting suggestions which I think are actionable, even only if we get together. Because the spirit of the alternative mining Indaba is Indaba of the people. I think that the solutions that we have from this army will be powerful as every year, but this time let's take it to another level. Let's get into more action, not just a call from us. But thank you so much for the four of you for your great insights, for your time, and thanks everyone for the attendance and the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Keta, and a round of applause again for the country. Thank you so much. That was very powerful and insightful, and I'm sure there's more to engage with and more things that people can still be able to reflect on the conversation later on. I'll quickly take you through some of our announcements for today, and then we can go into the feedback from the community, which is our last session. After that, we'll have the 87 seconds of silence and the closing prayer. Very importantly among the announcements and urgent for us all, please all the hosts of the Idea Lab submit their recommendations to their network. Do we have the email addresses ready? Yes. So we have the email addresses on the screen. Please send the recommendations to those email addresses before the end of the day, and any other things that you need to send. I think there were some forms that were circulated that you need to be in as well. Please make sure you do that. Tea and coffee will be served downstairs as usual. So once we are done with the prayer, we can have our tea. If you have any representation dates today, please make sure you hand them over before you leave. This one is an exciting one. So I think in the morning Francis announced that we can engage with our social media platforms, but also just make as many posts as possible about the Army using the hashtag Army2025. So we will do a selection of some of you that had the most engagement, and you will receive a little bit more in the morning. So please keep engaging as we'll do the selection in the morning tomorrow. We need 15 marshals for the march tomorrow. If you'd like to volunteer and help us, please hand your details at the reception or information desk. It's right downstairs. We need 15 marshals to support the march or the picket that we'll be doing tomorrow. So tomorrow we are starting at 8:45, just to ensure that we finish on time, as this is the last day. Those that are still staying in Cape Town, you might want to go out and see some of the sites here and there. So those that will be able to come here on time, the first 250 delegates will be having about 345 to 400 delegates a day. So the first 250 delegates will receive t-shirts and notepads, only up to 8:45. So if you don't show up at 8:45, you will lose out on the t-shirt and the notepad, unfortunately. People are excited and already planning on working out very nice. We also have poster boards for the bank tomorrow, which will be available again for the early comers. So please come as early as possible so that you can receive the podcast for the match. Yeah, I think so far those are the announcements for the day. Rapporteurs, are we ready? Okay. Okay, could we have one of those beautiful songs as they are getting ready to begin the presentation, the communication?